Oh crap, my camera cut out on me. Okay. There's a Simpson bracket, there's a floor joist, there's a joist hanger, there's a lag bolt, and there's a ledger board. Now what does a deck look like when it doesn't have these? Kaboom! And they'll get a laugh out that. Cool word for the day? Simpson bracket. Okay, you're walking up to the house, and this is the walkway that you see, and it has those 3 distinct round marks on the sidewalk. Do you know what they call those? Some people will know. Yeah, that means the walkway has been mud-jacked. That's what it looks like before. That's what it looks like after. What does it mean to mud-jack? All they do is that the walkway has settled on the right-hand side, probably because there's sand under it. It's settled. So a contractor came along, drilled 3 holes on the right-hand side, pumped fresh concrete under there, and literally it just lifts up the concrete, so it's the walkway, so it's even again. Question becomes, is it cost effective? It is. It's about 1/3 the cost of replacement. Okay, I'm going to move my camera a little bit, guys, because I think a static camera is what prevents it from, will prevent it from shutting off. Alright, we're still outside. Your buyer walks past an air conditioning unit. That one looks kind of old, and one of the questions they ask typically, or they should, boy, I wonder how old that air conditioner is. The age is always in the serial number. 100% of the time, if you can read the data plate and you can read the serial number, the age is buried in that serial number. But the challenge becomes, well, Linux is a little bit different than Train. Train's a little bit different than Goodman. So, how do you learn to know the difference? Here's an example. There's an AC data plate for a Linux. What year was it built? 1997. Okay, the way you tell the difference of how a Train was built is go to our website, and where it says what we inspect right up here, if you click on that, you're going to be taken to this page right here. And this page right here. Now this is the Building Intelligence Center. It is the website that all inspectors in the United States use to identify the age of an air conditioner, a furnace, or a water heater. It's got hundreds of manufacturers on there. I'm going to click on REAM, and what you'll do, you will be taken to a REAM database. A REAM data plate, and you'll be able to identify how to read that serial number. It'll be very specific on which digits in that serial number represent the date. Very cool feature. Now, if you want to do it, it doesn't take but a couple of minutes. If you don't want to do it, just call us and we'll do it. It takes about 10-15 seconds. We can always figure that out and help you out with that. Okay, we're still outside. Your buyer sees a heat pump. Now, they just read in the seller's disclosure that it was a heat pump. They ask you, well, how does it work? And I will ask the crowd, how does it work? Gosh, guys, you'll be surprised. 75% of them have no idea. A heat pump sits outside and operates as both an air conditioner and a furnace. So they go down to the basement, and guess what? They see a furnace. So they ask, well, if my air conditioner outside is a furnace, why do I need another one down here? Boy, is that a good question. Why do I need 2 furnaces? Well, a heat pump will work outside down to 35 degrees. Why 35 degrees? The heat pump is extracting heat from the air, but below 35 degrees, there's no heat in the air, so they automatically then kicks on the furnace, the gas furnace downstairs. How do you tell if you have a heat furnace? It will not be printed on the data plate, very seldom. Just go to the thermostat and look for emergency heat system. And if you see that on the thermostat, it's a guarantee that you have a heat pump. Okay, now we're going to take a brief intermission as we transition from exterior to interior features with a movie trivia question. First one with the correct answer wins unlimited use of Rob's MasterCard 24. You don't read that. You just let them read it. I guarantee if the broker's face is up there, they will laugh. Okay, this is a scene from what movie? And they'll all yell out, Finding Nemo. Yeah, you bet. What was the bluefish's name? They'll know that. Who provided the voice of the bluefish? They're always going to say Ellen DeGeneres, but you say, no, it's Linda Hammer. They'll get a kick out of that too if everyone knows Linda. And of course it was Ellen DeGeneres. Okay, enough of this foolishness, back to the presentation. Now guys, this is an aside now, James and Kevin. As I'm doing this, what I just went through maybe took 10 minutes. It's going to take you probably 20 minutes because you're going to be interacting with the crowd. You're going to be having conversations with them, answering questions for them. I'm just giving you the raw verbiage, and you'll have to react to the questions from the crowd, as they're mounted. All right, we're down in the basement now. All right, we're looking at this basement. We're looking at the foundation. There is a really cool feature right there. If you see that cool feature, point it out 100% of the time to your buyers, or if the house you're listing has this feature in it, make note of it. Put it in the seller's disclosure, because what you're getting ready to look at adds about $5,000 to $7,000 to the cost of the house. Depends on the size of the house, but it's very expensive. You ask them where it's at. Some will recognize it. Most of them will not. You point to that floor joist right there. It's the silent floor system. About 30 years ago, Georgia Pacific created the quiet floor, the silent floor system. And basically what it is, see that furring strip on top? You can walk up to the board and actually point to that little furring strip on top of the joist. Typically what happens is that you put plywood down on top of the joist, and then they nail the plywood to the joist, right? And then lay down the carpet or whatever in the top. What Georgia Pacific came up with is when they lay down the floor joist, they run a bead of glue across the top of that furring strip, and then they lay the plywood down, and then they nail it down. So there's two forms of adhesion, which reduces the squeaks about 90%. If you see that, point it out. It's a great feature. Cool word for the day, silent floor system. Okay, your buyer walks into the basement and they look at that monstrous looking thing and say, what in the heck is that? And guys, 90% of the agents have no idea what this is. But there's a lot of them in Kansas City. There's a lot of them in St. Louis. It's a PEX plumbing array. PEX being the plastic plumbing. And that's a manifold. Now, some of them are going to guess that's a tankless water system. It is not. It's the manifold. Works just like a car. All the water comes to that central point, and then it is distributed from that manifold to the different parts of the house. Color-coded lines. You know, cold on the right and hot on the left. Okay, you leave that house, go to another house, walk in the basement, and you see this. What in the world is this? Some will know, most won't. Of course, there's your PEX plumbing array. That's a tankless water heater. It is very cool, unlimited water, works at about 150 gallons or 150 gallons a minute, I believe is what it's capable of producing. Instantaneous hot water at 120 degrees. Very cool feature, very expensive. If they ask you about payback, you can tell them it usually takes about 10 to 15 years. You got to own it in order to get a payback on it because, you know, they're expensive, $3,000 to $4,000 to install. But that's what people use when they have a lot of people in the house or a lot of rooms and, you know, they just want an unlimited supply. Cool word for the day, PEX plumbing array. All right, here's a good one too. You've got an inquisitive buyer. They've gone online. They saw the word polybutylene, so they Googled it. Okay, what comes up in the Google search? Lawsuit, 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 lawsuit. So you walk in, you see some piping that looks like that, and you think, well, I wonder if that's polybutylene. The one on top is PEX. The one below it is polybutylene. How do you tell the difference? Well, PEX is always gray, but there's also a gray or a bluish gray PEX. So you can't just go by the color. Look for the stamp, PB 2110. That's a guarantee that you have polybutylene 2110. 100% of the time, bring it to the attention of the buyer. Now, it's a question whether or not you want to have a plumber come in and take a look at it. We typically do, but it depends on the way the piping was crimped. If it was crimped with copper, you're okay. The old style was crimped with aluminum, not okay. Back in the 90s, what happened is that the aluminum crimped piping ruptured behind the walls, created mold issues, and there were multi-million-dollar lawsuits because of that. They came in, they retrofitted them with copper or installed them with copper to stall with. You typically don't have a problem. They quit using polybutylene once again, I think at about 92, 93, somewhere in that area. So polybutylene typically would call out for a plumber to come and take a look at it. Okay, they walk in the basement and they see those tiles, and almost first thing they're going to say, and everyone in the audience will know this, are those asbestos tiles. You say, yeah. So what do you tell them? Everyone's going to be reluctant to say one way or the other. You say, you know what, there's an easy way if you can tell they're asbestos. They're 8-inch squares. Put your foot, just step inside one of those squares, you know the basic size of your shoe, and determine whether or not you have an 8-inch square. If it is, you more than likely have asbestos. Very common in homes built back in the 50s and 60s. Now, is it bad to have asbestos tiling? Not at all, if they ask you that. When does it become a danger? When you begin to remove it. or when it's damaged, because the asbestos fibers become airborne. You breathe them in, and now you get mesothelioma, and it does create issues then. But by and large, if they don't want to deal with that, just put carpet over it. You put hardwood over it. A lot of things you can do to cover it up. If you choose to remove it, just make sure you have a professional do it for you. All right, there's 2 electric panels that should always be replaced. Anybody know what they are? And some people will guess Federal Pacific stab block. You say, yep, there's 2 of them. The first one is stab block, and I can tell you with confidence 100% of electricians who walk into a house and they see stab block will want to replace it. Why? Because in the field failures, the breakers failed to trip. They created fires. This company has gone out of business as a result of that, but they were in business back in the 60s, and there's thousands of homes in Kansas City and St. Louis that have stab block panels. Now, the other one that's in question is called Zinsko, Sylvania Zinsko. And I say these should be replaced 100% of the time. That's not accurate. I think about 50% of the time, from what I've been told, electricians will recommend that you replace it or at least modify some of the breakers. Stab block, replace them 100% of the time. Zinsko, about 50% of the time. Now, my favorite and your favorite topic also, mold. There's over 1,000 strains of mold. Now, there's only one that's toxigenic. Toxigenic meaning it can kill you in very low quantities, according to the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. It is black mold. Everyone knows about that. Funny thing about black mold is that it's green. Yep. And you need very specific conditions for this to exist. It has to be high humidity, low light or no light, and water. If you have those 3 conditions for about 8 to 10 days, you can have black mold. It just doesn't exist in Kansas City. Anytime someone hears the word mold, though, their mind automatically goes to black mold, and that's just not the case.